I mean, and that's another one of those things. It's like I only believe. I mean, I don't really anymore, but like I used to say, the only reason why I believe the moon is real is because it talks about it in the Psalms. Like scripture like
Mm.
specifically references the moon. So that's how come I'm like, okay, I know that that thing exists. This is the same with like the all birds are fake or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? There are no real
All birds
birds.
are fake.
Have you not heard
What's
of
that?
this?
What are you talking
This
about?
is a fringe.
I'm looking at them right now. I'm looking at birds right now.
The theory is, and this is fringe stuff, but some people believe that pretty much a good portion of the bird population has been replaced by government drones. That
Oh, get
those
out
are
of here.
little tiny robots.
Oh, get out of here.
All right, so hello, welcome to Royal Path. I'm your host Andrew. And tonight I'm going to ask Cyprian and Father Turbo, are you guys in general speak more of fantasy or of science fiction? And follow-up question, is this kind of like a like this is not a very like this delineation between the two doesn't really need to exist? Are you like, no, I like both of them?
I am all about science fiction, but I will say that I am more into like very like human kind of psychological science fiction rather than like robots and spaceships blowing things up. Let me put it
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
So you're like into the Twilight Zone where they simulate a dude living
Uh,
alone on Earth for like 80 years.
no,
Okay,
I mean no,
you
more like I'm like into like Foundation or
okay.
Dune. You know what I mean? Where there's like a psychological, spiritual aspect that's really driving it, rather than like Isaac Asimov kind of like worldly,
So you're more of like
mundane level robot
emotional
things.
sci-fi rather than hard sci-fi. You like more exploratory,
Yeah,
like human
yeah.
sci-fi. What
Oh
about
yeah, like I'm like I'll watch some of my favorites are like um like the lone lost long journey spacecraft and kind of the psychological interaction between like two people in a spacecraft or like one person sort of like dealing with them, so that's what I'm into that.
did you read much Ray Bradbury?
I did. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
for sure.
What about you, Father?
Yeah, I'm pretty strong in the fantasy camp.
Really?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, you are. My bad. I forget you are. My bad. I kind of completely forgot for
Yeah,
a
I was
second.
I was a big Forgotten Realms guy, and Moorcock, Michael Moorcock is like, you know, Eternal Champions, Gods of Chaos and Law, stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's cool.
What are
But
the what's the theme that'll really draw you in, Father, when you're like, oh, you
is
know what
it
I'm saying?
is it just Drist? Is he just going to be the guy
yeah,
that
I
draws you
mean, no,
in?
no, no, it's not. I actually did a whole thing a couple years ago. I got invited to Doxicon.
To be tight.
And I did Doxicon like 3 years ago, whatever, 3 years ago. Um, and yeah, it was kind of great because it was a super honor to do that. Shout out to Father David. And yeah, I did a whole presentation on the anti-hero. And
Mm.
so I pulled together, like for me, yeah, it's Drizzt, but it's also Elric. I mean, Elric was first. Elric's like the first. I did a whole my big kind of like a thesis on the anti-hero and focusing particular on Elric and how Elric spawned more in, the kind of culture than people realize. It's like even if you've heard like The Witcher and stuff like that, that's all a
Oh
ripoff of
yeah. Yeah.
of
I was
Elric.
just about to say The Witcher is
Yeah,
probably like the prime
yeah.
example. You can only do that in fantasy, by the way. You
Only
actually can't do that in science fiction.
in regards of like the kind of plagiarism or
No, no, no. I mean, in terms of that type of character,
oh,
because the world that character lives in has to be fundamentally lawless
mm-hmm.
and unstructured. And science fiction, especially if you're doing like space style stuff,
Mm-hmm.
necessarily requires like this high level
Yeah.
of like organizational and regulated things. Otherwise, you couldn't even build the spaceships necessary to move around, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because I feel like the little bit of sci-fi that I have read, which is probably a ton compared to most people, whatever, but uh it's always it's always set in the kind of contrast tension of authoritarianism.
Always,
Always. Like
always has
always.
to be.
That's a great observation, Cyprian, actually, because like yeah, that's a great astute observation because the lawlessness is absolutely a necessary component.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely a necessary component. So yeah, so the kind of like tragic anti-hero is and really I mean uh, it feels like a stretch, but I mean really Eller kind of introduced that you can't really find the tragic anti-hero at the caliber of Elric prior to him that I'm aware of. Maybe someone's going to clickety clack and like actually blah blah blah, but that's one of the big things about Michael Moorcock, and about Elric in particular is like it was such a kind of genre establishing and breaking um, character and trope and everything. So I don't know, I'm a sucker for that. It's great.
Cool.
What about you, Andrew?
I'm not really into that nerd stuff. Like, I don't really.
He's waited so long to do that. He's just like, finally.
I actually came like a couple minutes ago. I was wonder what my answer is, and I was like, let's go with neither. I think I would probably have to be a Cyprian on this. I've like my first love was fantasy, and like I don't know. I think like you guys ever read Redwall?
Oh
Like
yeah.
yeah, like Redwall.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of my first when I was pretty young. Like kind of getting into like like the idea of like medieval aesthetic and all that kind of like fantasy magic stuff. And I got really into it for a long time. But I think when I discovered sci-fi, it was kind of like this is kind of more my speed. I like the commentary that sci-fi provided me, and it's been a long time since I've like really dived into a sci-fi series with any merit. Like I read like the Expanse series, most of it, and it's
Yeah.
really
Oh, Expanse
good.
is great.
It's actually like supremely good. It's a
Yeah.
very, very, but there's elements in there. Obviously, it's a little bit of propaganda for the overpopulation thing. Like the whole thing is like they pretty much depleted Earth of resources and stuff, and
Yeah.
they have like one unified like religion of the future. I think one of the characters is like I'm like the third or fourth book is like a priestess of like the universal world religion. And it's kind of some weird stuff like that kind of always trips me out about sci-fi. But when I first got into college reading science fiction and seeing kind of some of those observations and then also kind of experimenting with some not so good substances at the time was always like a really big impact on me. And some of my favorite authors are still science fiction writers. So, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, but
Well,
I
the
always,
depleted resources thing, and maybe this is a good jumping off point because there was something that there was a concept that I had been thinking about that I wanted to bring up with you guys. The depleted resources thing in science fiction, I think, is an absolute necessity. Because if you like, it's already there it's always already there in fantasy, right? That there's a
Mhm.
scarcity issue because if you don't have scarcity, you don't have stakes, right? So
Mhm.
you can't ever drive a narrative, which is the reason why, if you look at, so of course, the biggest like science fiction franchise that's supposed to be in a place where the future led to abundance is Star Trek. But you notice that all of the action has to take place where no man has gone before. Deep Space Nine on the edge of the frontier. You don't have any series taking place like on the worlds where there is abundance because there would be no stakes. whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like you have to, if you don't do the depleted resources, you can't drive a narrative. Right. But this was the concept that was interesting to me as I was like looking around. Being here is really interesting when you talk about like abundance and scarcity and like the play of that. Father, being here,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like this place that for like thousands of years, clearly everybody who was here perceived it as being incredibly abundant.
Mm-hmm.
And the culture built in such a way that like they do not plan. They actually culturally have no concept of planning. Like 2 years, 3 years, there's zero concept within the culture of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just react to whatever happened, because for thousands of years the culture was like, no, you're hungry, go fish, go pick something off a tree. Like it was just massive abundance, like Garden of Eden, right? But then in the market economy that they have here, like you go into the stores and like there is an abundance. Like there's no sparkling water on the island right now.
Man,
right? I had to go around. I had to go around earlier this week, and I got like the last 30 cans. I found like in this one store down in a bottom in a cooler, the last 30 cans. And I'm telling my kids like, hey, don't go crazy. Right. But hold on. Let me finish, because that we can jump off.
Well, there's implications there. I don't think I understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I want to talk about. Right. It is directly about that scarcity and about abundance. And it's this idea of like hard times make strong men make good times make weak men. Mm-hmm. That like and this is again in Hunger Games too. Like the people in the Capitol are all weak in every way. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's like that I think that it's like, Christ offers life in abundance. And I was thinking about that. Right. And I was thinking about the didache and like life and death in these two ways. And it's like the world seems to be offering death in abundance, like in every way that manifests itself. Mm-hmm. It's like the abundance that people are living in is contributing to their spiritual death, because they refuse to enforce some scarcity on themselves. That is what like tempers them and is what actually like purifies and cleans them, that the purification is in. So the fasting, the abstinence, like that, all of these things are us enforcing scarcity on ourselves, mm-hmm. even though we live in a world of abundance.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think,
and that like
mm-hmm.
Do you get what I'm saying here, Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because I actually think like it's interesting because we don't really look at economics through this lens. But like, what would a whole scale economy, Orthodox economy, look like that fasted? I think Saint Basil.
Totally different.
I think Saint Basil talks about that would fix economies. It'd fix economy if it went with like the rhythm of the church. If like people fasted and ate in according to like what the church, and like I remember him saying something about like that would fix an economy of a country, as if if
it fixes an individual.
Oh,
how could it not fix?
Work on the macro? Yeah, 100%.
Well, it's not even it could work. It's like the macro is just the scaling. The macro is just the scaling of the micro.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like if all the individuals are healthy, it would be like the society is more than likely going to be healthy. And if everybody is sick, the society is going to be sick.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is fascinating to me because I didn't know how I wanted to frame it, but like the thing I wanted to talk about tonight was like I had just a little kind of brief conversation today, and was talking about kind of like the problem with nonprofits, right?
Mm.
And here in particular, like with Kansas City, the city of nonprofits,
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous how many nonprofits are here. And so it was just, this is the kind of place. It's like there was so much on my mind. It was all kind of coming together. So it's one of the few times like I should maybe sit down and write this out, because there's just so much there. It was like I was talking about, first it started off about there's a culture of poverty in which people will, not pay their bills, and they'll wait until they get the late notice. And they've been conditioned to do this. They wait until they get the shut off notice, and then from there, they kind of go about and they try to get the means that they need, whether that's primarily going to going to social service agencies, and if that doesn't work, hitting the rounds of people for charity. And I got more. I just want to kind of like throw it all out. We can go from there. But like I was commenting on, that starts off as a, kind of this Pavlovian response in regards of like, well, we can't help you until you have like a dire need. And that is going to be evidenced by the shut off notice, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So you get literally 2, 3, 4 generations in, and I'm counting generations by like mother to child. That's how I'm counting. So when I say 2, 3, 4, I'm not being facetious or hyperbolic. So 2, 3, 4 generations in, and it's just kind of like they don't even know why they do it. It's like the thought of just like, well, why don't we just pay our bill?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And please, I can talk all day long and all night long to people about poverty. There's no one going to be out there that's going to tell me something about poverty. So like, not to be that guy, forgive me, but so that thing, I'm just kind of like, it short circuits and circumvents that faculty that would then kind of be one of many that build up that kind of like, not even just survival, but that dignity, you know what I mean? And it kind of plays out at the top end of dignity, and on the low end survival, blah, blah, blah. We can talk about that, right? But I just want to keep going, because from there, it's like you start looking at the reality of these entities, nonprofits. And I was talking about, it's like, they don't work in regards of this. And the reason why we talked about this before.
Well, they do, but they don't. They work in reverse. Right?
Forgive me.
They work perfectly. Actually,
they work perfectly. Actually, forgive me. They work perfectly. Let me catch my words more carefully. In order for nonprofits to function as people think they function, or as they should function, you have to build in. Well, first of all, the core of that nonprofit has to authentically be, we need to function as this is a scaffold, and we're only going to function until the need is there, and then we're either shutting down or we're moving on, right? And if you don't have that built in, and they don't, and you can't do it after the fact, because there's some who will say like, no, we have that. And I'm like, I bet you don't. I bet what you did was you did that after the fact because you understood ethically and economically the problem with your model. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But the thing is like, you have to start off at the core with that understanding of there needs to be a self-destruct mechanism in there, because if not, it just end up, existing for the sake of itself. Right.
Yes.
So then I was like, yeah. And that's why the church is that institution, or really that organism that should be facilitating and really doing all of the philanthropic needs in a society, in a culture, in a country. And that's where I was like, because within the church doesn't function for the sake of, social justice. That's not why the church exists. The church exists to manifest Christ. Social justice, charity, philanthropic work, that's a fruit of the existence of the church. But the church doesn't exist to do that. And that's where a lot of churches and a lot of very left-leaning people, they get it twisted. And that's where they get off the rails, because that's the problem with Judas. You know what I'm saying? They get off the rails. The poor you have with you always. You know what I'm saying? So you have to, the purpose of the church is to be united to Christ, to worship Christ. And then from there, if she's doing that, then she will do the works of Christ. Now, we fork off in two places. The one place we fork is, that's how you can tell whether a body is healthy or not. I'm not, because I noticed people are like, man, well, someone made a comment, and I like the negative comments. God bless you. Pray for us. I like them. But like, oh man, you guys, it's just, knocking other Christians and blah, blah, blah. It's like, whatever. But, God help us. But I do want to say this. I'm not saying that like if you're not doing this, you're not Christian. But I am saying if you're not doing this in your own personal life and in your community, then either A, you're underdeveloped spiritually, or B, you're not healthy. Because if you're healthy, right? If you're healthy, then you'll do the works of the master. And so there isn't, are you following what I'm saying? So there's that. But then the other side of it is
because if you're healthy, you will actually like have an internal desire.
Yes.
Because you are oriented toward Christ, and he has a desire for it.
Yes. And that's just the natural overflow. The other side of it where we can fork is, I was like, I want to double down on some stuff, because I was like, well, if someone wants, what was that charity dinner the other day?
The Catholic
charity dinner.
Al Smith dinner where Trump absolutely roasted.
Oh my gosh, Trump was just like,
oh, this is a funny guy. Funny guy.
His timing is incredible.
It was just fire raining down from heaven.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good, right? So I was like, okay, you know what? Here's the thing. I'll play ball, right? So check this out. This is how it goes. This is my open letter to President Trump. What would be great, President Trump, is what we have to do is you have to let's another kind of swamp. Let's drain. Let's take all the funding from these nonprofits, and then we can talk about the litmus for like what measurement of like a healthy faith community, right? But
are you saying the government funding?
Yeah. What you do is you empower faith communities to really, not just kind of like dole out, the material needs, but also you have to have that faith community build up the framework by which those resources don't go to waste. Because those resources aren't just money and food. The primary resource is actually the capital, the human capital that happens, because so many people get burned out. So many good well-meaning people get burned out because they go in there like they want to help. Let's just say whatever. I'm making it very tangible, right? Not abstract. Let's just say the Black community, poor Black community, right? Just helps people, right? So it's just easy to see like, man, day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. It's just like I'm seeing the same types of behaviors. It's despairing. And it's like people fall into despair, they get jaded. And that's where a lot of people flip, actually. They get a weird kind of soft radicalization because it can be like, it can prove tropes and stereotypes to them. But like what they don't understand is there's these frameworks that have to be built out, right? That's why it isn't just about the economics, right? But there's an ethical, moral component to it that only faith communities can bring. Yeah. Nonprofits, by definition, now can't do that. No. They have some that can try to like, dance their way around it a little bit. But even then, eventually what happens is that component gets squeezed out, or it gets so watered down because of any of the, kind of politically correct mandates placed upon them, that they can't give enough of an actual stringent medicine to get that person to repent.
Yeah.
So that they can start excising themselves of these very toxic behaviors, and kind of like, again, this conditioning, right? And so,
but then they would put themselves out of business, Father. And I think it's like for people to say,
that's what I want to talk about.
That's why it should be the church.
Expect that a business would do something that would put itself out of business makes absolutely no sense.
Which is
no business would do that.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter if they're nonprofit or not.
I think this is a weird attempt at Cyprian being like sarcastic. I think.
No.
Because he's usually not sarcastic like that. So it's like, I think like, because that's what I'm saying. It's like,
exactly.
It's like, I just making sure on the same page. I was like, because they will put themselves out of business. That's why you have the church, and the church should totally function on that. And again, it's like if we're really going to play ball, it's just like these are the types of things that you need to see. And it's like, yeah, the Zionism and all that stuff, that's another thing we can talk about. But on that level right there, like, yeah,
forgive me, because the church is trying, not, it knows that it's going out of business, because we have an eschatology.
Correct.
Like we have an endpoint.
Correct.
We know the church is trying to put. It's not. It's trying to save the world.
Well, yes, Cyprian. I would say the church does, but so much of who and what we're always trying to address, this isn't the same thing. Is that
right?
They don't believe that and they don't see that. Right. That's why the whole thing of like being a traditional, traditionalist is about being, it's whatever, it's a pun, but or a play on words, being a preservative, not a conservative, right? Because it's like that thing about conservative and resources, getting back to what you were saying earlier, it's like the scarcity of resources, that's not a law that we abide by. That's where it's it's all but a commandment to not do that. You see what I'm saying? But so many people do. So many quote unquote churches, Christians, they do that. You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those.
Wait, go back, Father, because I think there's something important there. So many churches do what? Dig into that.
They do not abide by that principle in which scarcity is not something that we should not abide scarcity. That idea of
the Lord was like, don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Lilies of the field. He's like, right. don't sweat it. There is no scarcity. What are you talking about?
There's no scarcity. So when you start operating out of scarcity, you're it's in one way of kind of stepping out of the kingdom. It's like stepping out of the kingdom and into the world. And so many people don't realize they're doing it. And then, next thing you know, it's like you step into the world, you don't realize it, and it's just kind of like it's its own wardrobe, if that makes sense, to kind of use a Narnia. It's like an inverted wardrobe. You know what I'm saying? Because you're kind of walking through and you don't realize like, oh, where am I? And it's like, well, you stepped out of the kingdom a while ago. The second you started worrying about, X, Y, Z.
And you're in a Costco buying toilet paper. Like, yeah. So, but
I mean, straight back to 2020.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no toilet paper. That tells you everything right there.
Tells you everything.
So
some lamb's ear.
Yeah. Father, I wanted to ask you real quick. And like I just want to say, to Father's point, I've worked for a couple nonprofits, and in one of them was they're to varying levels of being like a good organization. And the one that I'm talking about now is actually a fairly good organization. To the degree that I can, I kind of support what they're doing. But I remember being in a meeting, and it's a sober living program for men. And I remember being in a meeting, and the guy was mad because they had empty beds. And he was like, why are we only at 80% occupancy? And I was like, well, isn't that kind of a good thing? I mean, shouldn't we be operating under the idea? So that's just like to further prove Father's point. I don't know if it needed to be further proven, but that's kind of the heat that like they just operate like businesses. But the point is you talked about at some point that self-destruct button needs to be put in there, because otherwise an organization becomes too bloated and they exist just to exist, right?
Correct.
So this would help kind of perpetuate the cycle of poverty, or not of poverty, sorry, but the cycle of whatever this thing is hoping to address. And it's actually kind of just becoming, like, in other words, an enabler. Is that, I just kind of trying to summarize.
Yeah, I mean, enabler for sure, but that's also where you get certain phenomena like poverty pimps. A lot of race hustle is based on this.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I don't even have to say the names, do I? I mean, you can think of anybody with the Reverend in front of their name. It's like that hustle is so toxic, you know?
I think people don't understand just how like systemic this. So my younger brother, when he was at UCLA, we lived together in LA. His PhD thesis was He embedded himself in Skid Row for like 3 years.
Oh,
And he was writing about the structure. And then his PhD thesis was turned into a book. People can go and get it. It's called Down, Out, and Under Arrest. And it's about how the missions, which are, by the way, these gigantic, if people go into Skid Row, there are these gigantic institutions funded by the government. Skid Row's boundaries are designed around these missions, and how the criminal justice system and and basically the courts and the government work to keep to fill that area up for the benefit of these missions, and to keep people stuck inside of these missions. Which is and that it's the income from there, and it's become this organism that nobody can stop, and that nobody in any of the various things understands the entire. It's a fantastic book. It's what got him his professorship at University of Chicago. He's a tenure professor at Stanford now. But it's so crazy. LA is probably the worst of this, but like the fact that these sorts of institutions are going on all around, and we call them like nonprofits as though they're charities, but it's not. This is total powers and principalities stuff. And then people wonder why, like, oh, why is there a homelessness problem in California? Why did the homeless population explode? You could go and read my brother's book. Like, he predicted that this would happen, because he said we are spending millions and billions of dollars to create more homeless people and to keep them homeless.
I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, I'm sure it's been coined. It has been coined, and I'm sure this is not the first time we've said this on the podcast, but the homeless industrial complex.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
Has anyone seen that interview of the lady who runs like a shelter or something out in Portland, and she's wearing like a really nice jacket?
Oh, that hipster chick?
Yeah. It's almost like a Saturday Night Live skit.
It's like satire.
It's like when they show her, she should have like the money sign glasses, like two money sign. It's out of this world. And I mean, I'm kind of laggy tonight, but I've noticed that I've worked in the field, and it's just, there's so many things about it that do not work. And some of it can be chalked up to just straight up incompetency and not a real understanding of how the world works and how to actually end cycles. And for that, I can't really hold that against a person because they don't have Christ. More than likely, it's not an Orthodox Christian in good standing with this bishop that's in charge of those decisions. So I can't really fault Joe, Schmo, whoever that's kind of trying to just help. But at a certain point, it transcends that, especially when you're inside the belly of the beast. It's like, no, somebody somewhere is making a ton of money off of this. And it's like, what do you call it's not the ghetto. It's not quite a death camp. It's like a dead zone. It's like, how do
Skid Row or something like that?
Every place in every city that's like that, where it just tends to be the place where those kinds of people crowd. It's usually around missions. It's usually around areas that resources are available. I mean,
what's the place in Philly that fentanyl really exploded out of? There's a particular place in Philly, a particular location like that.
I don't know.
That it was the harbinger where people were like, what is this thing where people are zombified? And it's like all of these drugs started there.
That's Trank.
So it was Trank.
Trank is like, that's apocalyptic. When you look at the way that people look, that's like The Walking Dead. But
this started 5 years ago in a particular district in Philly, Kensington district.
Kensington. Okay.
Kensington. And it's like, wait, how? Why? It was like, it's nowhere else. And then all of a sudden it's like, boop, it's like it was dropped in there on purpose. It's like these are incubators of something.
It is. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not with it, but I've seen it. I feel like the android at the end of Blade Runner, when at the it's like crying in the rain, it's like tears in the rain or whatever, because it's like I've seen things that I'm like, just like, this is the thing everybody's talking about. I'm witnessing it. I'm witnessing the creation, or not the creation, but the enforcement of a dead zone. It's like a place where it's like they have almost by like geographical and economical and I would of course say spiritual factors like led the people to living in this certain spot, and you're supposed to stay in the spot, and there's whole systems to help you to stay in the spot. It's like almost like
I
where you
mean,
send the mentally insane and the drug addicted and the poor to go and die.
it's just tough because for me, this is one of those moments where it's just like I this intersection of what we're talking about. I mean, this is so important and integral. It's one of the reasons why when I see people who I know they're hungering for, and I'm not talking about someone in a foreign country who I don't know. I'm talking about when I talk to Americans and Westerners and like whatever, and even people coming from Europe being here, whatever. But this is that kind. It's I don't man, I don't even know how to have the words for it. It's like a cross. It's like a portal. It's a matrix. It's all these things that on the one side are the people who are just kind of like, you know, whatever the spectrum they're on, whether they're like, yeah, I'm a faithful Orthodox Christian, or like, I don't believe anything and I smoke weed and I'm a juggalo. Like they find themselves on one side of this kind of like threshold, and then there's reality. And I mean reality in the sense of like, just to give everyone an image, almost like, one of the good things Constantine did. Remember in Constantine where it's just like everything flips
Oh, he does the
and it's
mirror.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just hell, but it's just like right, it's just like that.
Yeah.
What I'm speaking about is this is why so many people really don't understand Sophrony. Like I know this because I know this fact. I know I've literally talked with people and they're like, yeah, blah blah blah. But I'm gonna tell you the difference between someone who's like, yeah, I understand Sophrony in regards of a kind of like objectively academic whatever versus like, no, do you understand what he's saying? Because it's this thing of horror. It's this thing of the reality of this fallen world, and not just kind of like, oh, boo hoo, but then I'm gonna go home and like forget about all of it. You know what I'm saying? Like this threshold on the other side, you can't find God to what we're always trying to talk about. This level of finding God that I'm speaking about. You can't find God. You can't find the spiritual life. You can't do these things unless you bear that cross and cross over that threshold. As long as you keep everything safe, this is going back to the conservatism. This is going back to whatever. You can never truly cross that threshold. Now, people are going to take umbrage with what I'm saying because you're like, oh, so what, Father? Like, am I supposed to just, offer my kids to the rapist and the drug addict? That's not necessarily what I'm saying because it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily you need to go and put yourself in harm's way, right? Because that's not, we pray for a Christian ending, painless, blameless, and peaceful, right? That's not what I'm saying to that extreme. But you know that if you say that to me, what you're really trying to do is run and deflect with what your heart is screaming about. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the thing is that you don't need to just say, oh, whatever, like, should I just go sleep in the ditch with all other junkies with my baby? No, but at the same time, stop trying to build a false reality. Stop trying to like avoid and sweep everything under the rug, because this is the thing I'm trying to get at is that place, those dead zones, all those things. It's like the kind of overt, gross, gross in the technical term, occultism that a lot of people, you can't really talk to them about evil or the demonic unless that's involved. You know what I'm saying? They just go like, oh, yeah, like kid listen to heavy metal and he's, black metal and he does the thing, like, or whatever people think. You know what I'm saying? Even getting to like, okay, yeah, Diddy, whatever. So that's fine. But what should be really frightening to people is, it's like, I remember you were hot on this a while ago, Andrew. It's like, no, World War II was actually bringing, not metaphorically, literally hell.
World War One.
Excuse me, World War One. Forgive me.
So,
literally hell on earth. And so the thing is, I don't mean literally as in I have a bad vocabulary and I use literally like. I mean it in the in its exact definition right now. And so,
The same structures are bringing about dead zones that brought about World War One.
Skid Row in LA or Kensington in Philadelphia is hell on earth.
It's hell on earth.
There's no question.
So when we say that term, what I'm trying to deconstruct right now is that's a figure of speech for most people. I'm saying no. That's why I invoked the Constantine image. If anyone's ever see it, you know what? It'd be nice. Maybe you could pull it up real quick. Because there's a lot of people who've never seen Constantine. And so someone else made a comment. I want to do better at like keying people in on things, whatever. Because, God bless you. But like while you're pulling it up, I'm saying, it was like hell on earth. No. I don't mean hyperbolically. I don't mean as a figure of speech. I don't mean as a metaphor. I mean literally like, here is a red book. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by it brings hell on earth. Speaking of fantasy and sci-fi, it's a literal portal to hell. Right? In which demons come in and out and all around and manifest and all that stuff. And you don't need some, basement dweller with a grimoire talking about it. Right? Well, it's literally that guy, that, executive director, that CEO, whatever, who's like, yeah, I have the mask of good intention, this and that, but deep down in the heart, there's the unchecked avarice and greed and vainglory and vanity and all of these little imps and all these little movements and all these things that are, building a body in which the demonic manifests, right? And so this is why these things are so important in regards of the structures aren't something far removed. And this is another area where on the one hand, politics is a sucker game, but on the other hand, it's like, it's the thing. It's the thing. And that's where a lot of quote unquote church folk miss it and don't get it. And that's why, just for all of you, if there's anyone even left, we're always talking about like Trump or whoever else, is because it isn't about like, having some derangement, because it's like, man, I love that it caps on people. That's great. But if you want to get down to like the nitty gritty on how these things play out, in regards of the metaphysical reality, which isn't, some, kind of like arcane thing. It's very tangible. It's very tangible.
Speaking of, Father, I've got the scene. At least one of them. I have one of them.
Great.
I've got the one with the cat, not the tub.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
That's great.
Looks like a war, right?
So it's like, okay, someone's like, hold on, blah, blah. You're just talking about, you don't need to like be an occultist and blah, blah. rob the scene to just kind of prove a point. I mean, that's the point of like, narrative and things like that. But if you've been in these places, Kids Road, Kensington, 9th Street here, it's like these areas, sometimes maybe not, maybe there isn't hot ash blowing, but
It looks like
the burnt out cars and then like whatever. And I think the thing is again, getting back down to it, it's like, look, this is the thing. It's the chiliastic movement of just trying to build. It's funny because that one guy is like, "Oh, I think you guys are the ones who wanting to have a worldly leader." I'm just like, man, bro, no, because this desire to kind of maintain and conserve and see the world for something that it isn't, and really cannot be until he comes. When he comes, it's the end. There is no millennial reign and all that stuff. So this gives you a right orientation in which you enter into that deep place of mourning, because that's all we got. Because that reality too is, I think another thing people got twisted is, again, this is kind of part of, I'm just trying to explain our ethic of why we're so kind of like, party poopers about certain things. It's like party poopers because ultimately it's like, I'm saying, okay, let's play ball. Here you go, President Trump. Here's an open letter. That'd be great if I get a call. He's like, great, blah, blah. But the reason I'm saying this is because even if that is the case, it's understanding what it is. It's to stand in the face of that horror and still do it and manifest Christ. Like I'm going to give, if you want to do good work, if you want to do corporal work of mercies, if you want to help people who are struggling and disadvantaged economically, materially, you better understand that like the poor you'll have with you always, and like your job isn't to make them have a happy middle class life. That's not that isn't the existence.
Yes.
And that is fundamentally what they all exist to do. At least that's their mission statements. That's their whatever. And that's what they want the government to do too, is to just kind of like, make that stuff go away. That's why it has to be the church, because the church is like, yeah, I'll meet your material needs because, that's necessary because it's compassion and it's love. But fundamentally, I'm there to bear witness to your suffering. And in that bearing witness to your suffering, there is a very real potential for communion. And in that potential for communion, then there's a potential for repentance. And that's where your life will change. But your life changing doesn't mean that you're going to have the same economic advantage that you're envious about. Or that's one of the reasons why you're, in poverty and on drugs anyways, is because of unchecked things like envy and other passions, right? You follow me? Because yeah. Sounds like, oh, that's easy for you to say, living in your whatever. I'm telling you, man, you don't know where I live. You don't know where I've lived. And so that's
North
why
Hyde Park, or that part of Kansas City is not what it used to be. I mean,
I'm just, even before that, I'm just saying that like this is important because I think it's a very noble thing. And I think if we had more Christians who are like, yeah, I'm actually want to continue to, I'm going to receive that thirst from the Spirit to, be broken bread and poured out wine. That's what we're lacking. And that's what I was getting back to earlier, but like, that's how you can tell a lot of people and communities aren't healthy because they have no interest in that. And I'm like, you can't have just a sole interest of, this St. John Chrysostom, this quote that's at least attributed to him about, you're not going to find Christ in the child if you don't find Christ at the beggar, right? Like, too many people, they just want to now, I mean, especially this is going back to stuff we used to talk about a lot, but that's social justice. Social justice equals woke equals whatever. And it's like that in itself is a trap. It's like,
yeah.
We don't exist for that. But at the same time, without that component of seeing broken Adam, you'll never see not just yourself, but you'll never see him. You'll never see God in that fullness that I would imagine you want to see him. Because see, everybody wants to see him in the glory, and that's a problem with all the the kind of neo the Neo-Byzantine peoples. Like, they just want glory. They just want the godworm Emperor Trump to come and fix everything. But it's like, it's not about it being fixed, man. It's about staring in the horror of this fallen world and the age that we're in. Like that, like it's embracing. It's funny because I'm just throwing this out. People don't realize how kind of anachronistic they can become. You know what I'm saying? They're.
What does anachronistic mean? I'm not sure I know what that word means.
It's when someone is involved in something that belongs to a time period that is not
different time.
Yeah. It's like of a different time. You know what I mean? It's yeah. I don't want to kind of open a door here. But
can I just say real quick, Father, St. John Chrysostom says that people who walk home from church, he's like, people walk home from church and step over the poor without giving them. And then that night they go to their prayer corner, not even worried about being struck by lightning. And like,
oh, that's great.
I love St. John.
But forgive me. It seems, Father, I want to go back to your. What I'm getting is that there's this, in terms of if we're talking about Christian charity, like, and what's the difference of this sort of institutionalized charity? And I think in some ways it's like, there's the orientation difference. To me seems like very palpable, as Andrew was talking about the beds, like the empty beds, to where if you are viewing quote unquote the poor, even if we're talking about the poor, right, as opposed to talking about individuals that we are encountering, like if we are talking about them as bodies to fill a bed, I feel like that's the place where it's already, the orientation is already gone. But the church demands that we engage them as people, as souls. The church demands that we engage them as souls, because they're people.
Because they're people, and that's why a lot of things. I mean, so I've had so much strife and falling out with people over this because, you know, people I love and well-meaning people, and it's like, because this reality of like your identity in Christ, quote unquote, your identity, what else, being tied to, you know, a really at best misdirected, well-meaning but misdirected, you know, kind of ethic around poverty and like what it means in the life of the poor person. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's funny because I'm thinking about all my associates and friends and things like that who are like professional helpers, whatever the word would be. You know, it's like very few of them are poor themselves or have been poor. Very, 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 very few. Very, 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 very few. Or have been in jail themselves, or have been addicted themselves, or been a victim of violence themselves. Very, very, very few.
Are you talking about the workers in these places?
They have a solution. But yet they have a solution.
But yet they have a solution.
This is something I wanted to say earlier, and forgive me, Father. It's like the part in Brave New World where the people from the high society like go on like a safari. It's like they like, ooh, I'm gonna step down
to see the savages. Yeah,
yeah, to see the savages. It's the same thing.
That's what I used to say all the time. I used to say all the time when certain contexts back for community back then, they'd be like, you know, back when I was, you know, kind of like having to work through some stuff, and people thought I was salty now. I mean, it's just back then, but it's like, oh, everyone, here we go on safari. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like people coming down, they want to, you know, they want to see the savages. They want to see, you know, whatever. And it's like, look, man, I appreciate it. I get it, because there's a place for everybody. I mean, I will just say there's a place for the person who's like, and this is the trick. This is how you do it. I don't have the fortitude emotionally, psychologically, and even physically. I don't have the fortitude to do what you're saying in regards to facing these things directly, but I do care. And I hope someone makes it this far before they start making all kinds of crazy comments, right? Like, but I do care. And here is, and this is in my heart of hearts, this is what I'm trying to do with in my own weakness, and they donate resources. That's legit. And the reason why it's legit is because in their humility, they're acknowledging their weakness and they're not feigning anything. You see what I'm saying? They're not feigning anything, because not everybody can be on the front line. It's like not everybody's an eye, not everybody's a hand. That's great. But this orientation of the heart in regards of humility and really seeing things as they are, heck, you don't even necessarily have to like do anything yourself. But I think that the kind of covering up that people do, the turning of the blind eye, and people do it in all kinds of ways, right? Not only just kind of like, I won't look at the guy at the freeway. I don't want the guy talking to me at the gas pump. Okay, I can understand that. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then like one of the ways that people try to cover it up is like, why don't you get a job, man? You know what I mean? It's like, and here's the thing. Here's how I'm going to reconcile something, because someone's like, well, hold on here. Earlier, you were talking about people not having certain kind of dignity, and it's just like they've been conditioned for handouts. And now you're saying the person who's like, just get a job is like cold-hearted. Well, which one is it? And I'm like, it's both and. Because the reality of, like, if you've ever had someone in your life who is legitimately struggling with some sort of chronic issue, whether it's drugs, whether it's some sort of like mental quote unquote illness, or they don't have a framework in which they've been given what we would call, kind of like soft skills or life skills, right? That's a reality. That's one of the problems of poverty, is that people aren't given a framework on how to function. You could say in our society, okay, whatever, but I would just say just in general, function in a way that is, not even complimentary, but acknowledging the inherent dignity that they carry as a human being, right? And so how do you evidence that? Well, the great thing about the churches is that it isn't as varied and, kind of wildly swinging as people might act. Here's what I'm getting at, right? When you look at the life of someone who's, let's say, struggling with a passion, you know what I mean? And let's say you have an uncle who has a drinking problem, okay? And it's like, your uncle with a drinking problem, right? Everyone wouldn't understand this. As long as Unc wants help and is trying, you're there for him. Notice I didn't say succeeding. Notice I didn't say that Unc has beat it and he's, got his car and his house. I'm saying trying, but because here's the thing. If we're all being honest, right? Maybe there's a few people who can't tell, and that's where you need to get, your mommy and your daddy, or maybe like a priest to help you out if you can't tell the difference. But most of us can tell when someone's authentically struggling and failing.
Yeah.
That's very different than the kind of like, I'm going to run, not necessarily game, but I'm just going to kind of like not care and just, everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Dare I say, one is
it
repentance.
feels the vibe.
Well,
You don't. I mean, for me, it's just you can sense it immediately.
Yeah,
it's repentance versus not repentant.
Right.
Yeah, it's.
Like,
I was gonna say it's a feeling of. The difference is that there's a feeling of. This is going to sound wrong. It's wrong, but this is the word that's coming to mind. There's a feeling of shame in the repentant individual. And there's a clear shamelessness in the unrepentant individual.
I mean, let's just go there real quick. Let's just kind of like push the pause button, go a little side fork. Right. We've talked about this before, but I just want to say it again. It's like, man, you know what? Just for everyone who doesn't understand this, this is another problem with pop psychology, and especially those unfortunate, quote unquote Christian Orthodox souls and pastors who want to adopt modern pop psychology. It's like shame is not a bad thing. And it's like a lot of people are kept in a perpetual loop of sin because they've had some self-righteous, self-serving, ignorant therapist or caseworker or, clergyman, member, somebody trying to help them and say like, oh, you're dealing with shame and blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. No, no, no. I'll play ball in as far as like, okay, maybe we can delineate and talk about some kind of quote unquote toxic shame, and we can get into literature on that, blah, blah. But the thing I'm trying to get at is like that shame is a blessing. Shame's given to us so that we can know truly where shame is the contrition and that reflex of the soul that indicates there's not only a wound, but that there's still life. Because that shamelessness is a hallmark of a soul that is dying.
Yeah. It's a
Yes.
catalyst for repentance.
Yes.
So this absence of shame, it's so much, it's like why our young women aren't women anymore. They're becoming animals and they're moving away from their natural use, as Paul says. It's a shamelessness. You know what I'm saying? It's why you see so many people who are just like the shamelessness. Now that's the toxic thing. We need more shame.
Yeah.
We need to embrace shame more as a means of actually governing us as people, as in our communities. Now someone's gonna be like, okay, this is sick, father, blah blah blah. Like, I don't care. Like this is just the reality of, it's kind of funny. I'm gonna say this too. I observe this. I find that a lot of people who make these comments about things, I was thinking about my years of like undergrad stuff and just, kind of like in the trenches of cutting my teeth and all this stuff. All these people who talk about shamelessness and patriarchy and like looking back on it, I'm just being really honest now. You know what I mean? It's like none of these people had families. Like, I guess I'm really thinking it's like none of these people had families. They tended to be people, if they had family, they had like a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They had like a kid. They were never business owners. They never had any responsibility for any human being, really. You know what I'm saying? And their marriages were always in disorder. Is this a sweeping generalization?
No.
Not really.
No, I don't
Not
deserve
really.
it.
Not really. This is what I have found primarily, and I don't think that is a coincidence. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that's a coincidence.
Father, forgive me. I think that the pathological victimhood is like a trick of the devil to induce people to shamelessness. Because how can you feel shame if you're a victim? The victim, don't shame the victim, right? That's what they say. You're victim shaming.
Yep.
So therefore, if you're always a victim, then you have no shame. Therefore, you are shameless. Then your soul is dying.
Yeah.
This is how we kill your soul.
This is how you
kill your soul. See it.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yep. That's it.
And, I mean, I work in the mental health field. You see it all the time. You see people. It's beyond just giving the kid the iPad to give him to shut up. It's like give the kid the drugs. It's given to every single like temper tantrum. It's continuing to validate their behavior. There are people that don't make contact with our mental health center for 4 or 5 months, and I look in and there's still an attempt made to call every week just to like see how I'm like, you cut off services. They're done. They're going to continue to do this. My old boss had the best definition of enabling is like uninformed love. And I would say that like actually, as an Orthodox Christian, it's like unchrist-like love. It's like, it's very much of like, we will meet your physical needs. And we talked about this before, but what you really have to look at is the motivation behind why these organizations exist. And I think one of the big reasons why is because I think, and just speaking generalities, like Father said, if been proven true, rich white liberals generally just don't want to look at it.
Well, here's the thing. I just want to throw this out there because I'm going to go one step further. It's going to be tough, whatever. But, this enabling thing, it really is, a veil of vanity. It's a type of hypocrisy because really people who enable, the reason why they enable is because they're caught up, they're ignorant of their self-love.
Yeah.
It's self-love.
It's
And
almost
here's let me say what I mean by that. It's like the parent who crosses beyond just like, man, it hurts to see my kid do it. It hurts, of course, to see your kid do it. But like, if you really love your kid more than yourself, for instance,
yeah.
there's a point where you have to let them feel pain.
Yeah.
Like that is, it goes all the way from like, you know what I mean? I got to give a SWAT, or I got to give a let's just even say like a consequence, all the way up to like, hey, my kid is like a junkie and it's like stolen my car 4 times and like beat up his younger brother to the point where I had to take him to the hospital. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like at some point in time, the enabling, is only done with, at some point in time, you can only get to that point of ceasing the enabling if at some point in time you realize this is self-love. This is, I am more motivated and concerned about my pain of seeing my loved one hurt than I am them.
Yes.
That's the thing. And it even looks like, those who just kind of like, I just want it to go away. I don't want to look at it. That's a type of self-love too. Because really, the motivation isn't about the other. And I want to say, for a lot of us, we don't have the grace to love people like that. But they can at least try to be like, I don't love people like that, but I want to love God. So let me, you see what I'm saying? You see how I did that?
Yeah.
And so the thing is like, it's even an absence of loving a God, because you're saying to yourself, it's like, well, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to deal with that. But isn't that literally what Christ calls us to understand and to deal with? And I'm not saying go out and make, mayonnaise sandwiches and hand them out. I'm just saying, like, when we say like, I don't want to look at that, I want to act like that doesn't exist. You want to act like it doesn't. First of all, it does exist. That if it's just stop right there. It does exist. And these problems do exist. And that's part of the problems with all this high-minded whatever about, it's like, I would like to hear some people. I love jumping around. I would love to hear some people give me some. What are the reasons why people want Trump to win besides like, okay, yeah, Kamala's a liar. She's not black. She's a communist. Of course, everything's going to be really terrible and worse with her in there. I don't care about that. That's super obvious, right?
Yeah,
that's super obvious. What I want to hear about is like, what are people really thinking? Like, what do they expect? Like, or like, yeah, I don't want the wokes running the library. Okay, cool. I'm down with that. What else? Like, let's really talk about society, right? Like, because I'm submitting a lot of people's idea of society is just kind of like, man, how do I consume uninterrupted? I'm sorry. I'm telling you, that is.
No, that's actually, that is exactly their ideal.
How do I consume uninterrupted? I'm talking to Christians. I'm talking to Christians. You know what I mean?
This is the death in abundance, Father. This is what I'm talking about. This is when I said death in abundance. That's what I was talking about. That's what I mean.
I think, to speak to Father's point from just a second ago, I know it's hard to pull up next, like on an exit ramp. It's every exit ramp here in Kansas City. There's a homeless person standing there. And I know it's difficult to pull up right next to him, and you don't have anything to give or anything like that.
Look him in the eye.
Look him in the eye. Say a little prayer, just something. It doesn't have to be a big deal. But I mean, I'll be the first to admit it's difficult for me too. I mean, it's really hard to look at someone like that. And I think it's
not hard for me. And forgive me. It's like, okay, taking me, like, it's not hard for me. I'm gonna tell you why it's not hard for me. Because this is like tele spirituality, whatever, right? I'm gonna help everybody out right here. Just there's this thing, and it's so real. It's just so real, and you can do it too. I don't have special powers because I'm a priest. You know what I'm saying? You can do it too. You know how like that, just like, oh, I'm so worried about my friend Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy.
You're I know it's been a while, right? That Western Rite priest jacked Jimmy for a bit. But anyways,
was wondering how he was doing.
Apparently not so hot. Apparently he's not doing so good right now.
Pastor
took kind of
Jimmy.
a bad run.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, like this is real talk, like I just want to help everyone out. Like this is just real. Just try me. Just try it. Right. I'm not, it's literally no one is going to be able to say you're wrong, Father, blah, blah, blah. Right. You have a problem. You're feeling bad about your friend Jimmy. You're not praying for him. Yes, I am, Father. I'm still, it's like, no, you're not. Because I'm going to tell you why. When you actually pray about a situation in the way that you're being called to pray, you won't have that nagging feeling of anxiety and dread and worry. I am literally telling you, may every man be a liar. God is not a liar. Like that's the thing. And that's why I'm just gonna say it's no big deal. I don't sweat that stuff because number one, like, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever the poor, but it's like I got no problem looking someone in my eye and being like, hey, what's up, man? You know what I mean? And just giving them that human dignity. And on top of that, if you do give what you can, whether it's time, talent, treasure, like whatever the thing is,
Sure.
right? Guess what? If you actually do that, you're not going to have that feeling. That feeling of like, I'm uncomfortable. Do you know where that feeling comes from? It comes from you not doing something. Like full stop.
That's right.
Period. There is no
That's
nuance. Right. There's no shift to that. There's no like other take to it. It's really simple, right? You don't feel comfortable about fill in the blank. I don't care what it is because you're not praying about it and you're not doing your due diligence. So when I say pray, I don't mean just like you're sitting in the prayer corner and like mindlessly reading your prayer book. That's not just what I'm talking about. That may be enough for you, right? But for some people, that kind of contemplating on something, that being willing to like hurt with someone, rejoice with someone, cry, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice. It's like prostrations. There's so much the church gives for you to enter into that place of compassion. What is compassion? What is the etymology of that for us in the English language? It means to suffer with.
Yeah.
Suffer with, yeah.
When you have compassion, see, people think compassion is feeling sorry. That's not compassion. That's self-pity, right?
Yeah. Yep.
When you have compassion, you don't feel like, oh man, like da-da-da. That's why I can be like, yeah, you're not praying. It's
and Father, forgive me. This is to get back to something that we have not mentioned for a while, but this is exactly what you're saying, and it's held true for me. Is like when you've said before that, and people have asked, well, how much should I give in terms of giving alms, and you said, well, I'm not going to tell you an exact number, but it should sting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because the sting is compassion. It's the suffering with. If it stings, then it's compassionate giving.
It's compassion.
So, Father, would this possibly like the prayer thing? Could you kind of extend that out to like anxiety or fretfulness about like the news headlines and stuff? Like if someone is like really struggling with the anxiety that is produced by reading headlines, is this? I mean, if you were to hear about be distressed.
I mean, honestly, it depends on who the person is. Probably 7 times out of 10, I'd be like, well, just stop reading the news. Because what's happened is you've gotten addicted to that titillation.
Yeah.
And the titillation has now basically like overcome you. The titillation has.
That leads me to two other questions. One, St. Paisios used to have a friend send him newspaper headlines clipped out and sent to him so he could pray for him. At a certain point, St. Paisios said, stop, I can't do this anymore. Like, and that's St. Paisios. So he was like, I can't, this is too much. And that man also spoke about mystically experiencing war that was happening on other sides of the world, and he still couldn't handle the news headlines. So that's a base level of like, hey, maybe these things are more harmful than you realize.
Yeah, because I don't think he couldn't handle it because of like, oh my gosh, news so bad. It's because the news headlines
were so.
Journalists are trained to give you a headline that's going to. Yeah. It's the same thing of titillation. You know what I'm saying? That thing that you're originally chasing, that high, begins to take a toll, and then it instead of what began to, and then I just love saying the word titillate, and it then becomes it's like man, I hate to go there. This is the PG-13 episode, maybe, but I'll do whatever. Who cares, right? Um, there's this thing like phlebitis, whatever. It's like there's a certain kind of shall we say rawness
Ah,
that someone begins to uh experience because of too much stimulation. You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
Oh,
mhm,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
mhm,
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
mhm,
So this is important because like, hey, this is reality. People do this spiritually all the time.
mhm,
Doesn't necessarily have to be in the sexual realm. You know what I'm saying? It's like this
More energy.
phenomena just it plays up, whatever. It plays out however you whatever your poison is. This is
mhm.
this is essentially what happens. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, this is getting the thing of getting into like circumcision and like, like why circumcision? You know what I mean?
But so speaking of that rawness, I was reading a thing, it was a quote, and I don't think I saved it and I should have, but it was someone. Sorry, hold on one second. My mic will be back in just one second.
It's back.
And there we go. Okay. Someone asked Saint Porphyrios like about the nature of the sensitivity that that individual was feeling, and
Mm,
Saint Porphyrios said basically, no, this is a wrong type of sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle with this a lot where I will hear something about, and so like, yes, Father, if you need to reprimand me on live air, that's totally cool. I'll handle that. But I fall into this thing where sometimes it can wreck my day, or at least a good half hour of my day if I hear about something on the news happening to a child. Like, like something like that. And like, is that the wrong type of
No,
sensitivity?
that's not what he's talking about. See,
Okay.
Freud talks about the same thing as people who like they in their vanity and their delusion, they want to um kind of like masquerade their neurotic tendencies as
yeah.
spiritual sensitivity. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about it's like because there's the other side of it, which is where a lot of Orthodox people or a lot of conservatives find themselves, unfortunately, is they find themselves on that other end where they're desensitized to things. That's
Yeah.
not good either.
Yeah.
Like we
But they're
should not
both
be
epidemics right
they're
now.
they're
Both of
both
those are epidemics.
hey, the real path. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like
Yeah.
it's a problem. It's a real problem. And so yeah, it isn't it should not be in place because it's like this is another thing where I thought about this too because it's like I've been in the public square talking about Sophrony for a couple years now at this point, right? But like as time goes on, I was like, oh, did I like realize, man, people read Sophrony or something like that, and it's like, yeah, I get it. It's just mm, like there's a context of suffering that I think it's very if someone doesn't have that context of suffering, then it's very easy for them to probably read something like Sophrony or even to hear what Porphyrius is talking about, and they take on an affect, and it's a kind of
Mm.
spiritual, kind of neurosis. Because let's just be clear, suffering isn't just about feeling pain. See, that's another thing is that people think like some people get this idea where it's just like, oh, all pain is like valuable. No, it's not. No, it's not. And everyone feels pain, but not everybody suffers. To suffer means to patiently endure. And it's in that patient endurance of pain, injustice, suffering, terror, horror, trauma, quote unquote, whatever, that you begin to now take on a likeness. And that likeness comes discernment, virtue, all these things. You see what I'm saying? So I just want to give that kind of qualification because it's like everyone has the potential to suffer, but not everyone does. And I think that's the big rub here because there's people who can hear what I'm saying and they can think that I'm saying like, if you're not in the hood and you're not doing what I'm doing, then you're just not Christian. It's like if you're hearing that, then it's like that's your own ego's like self-defense mechanism trying to dodge what your heart's really trying to say to you. Because there's plenty of the faithful suburban mom who's suffering
Yeah.
because she's like, this is the hardest thing for me to do, but like I cannot let Jimmy stay the night tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like there's plenty of moms who are doing that. There's plenty of moms who are just like, there's plenty of wives who are just like, I have every right to divorce my husband, and I'm not divorcing him because I'm weak. I'm not divorcing him because of like I'm scared of what the church people are going to say. I'm literally feeling my conscience being called by the Holy Spirit to just endure with my husband for a period. You know what I mean? There's plenty of women who are doing that.
Yeah.
They're suffering, and suffering. You can be in a Beamer with furs and whatever yoga pants, and that's not. This is not what I'm talking about, people. Like that's and I. It's a shame that I have to say that. You know what I'm saying? It's a shame that people don't understand what I'm trying to get at in
Well,
regards
and
to
Father, there's the contrary is also, forgive me, the contrary is also true, because you can. There's plenty of people who are in pain. I mean, well, Skid Row in Kensington, or I mean, if you're slamming something in your arm, you know what I mean. Instead of feeling the pain, like you've made a decision not to suffer. You're
I
in
gotta.
pain, but you're making a decision not to suffer.
Yeah. I mean, this is a tough one for me here because it's like I got people on both sides of the aisle. More one side of the aisle than others, but I still have a few on the other side of the aisle. And it's like sometimes things will get personal and talk about whatever, but it's like when you get into personal accounts of people who have, abandoned families or like done whatever, it's like it's really hard for me to find empathy and to find compassion because I know from experience that that person who just gives themselves over to fill in the blank, they're not willing to suffer. See that's the person who's messed up their life. That I don't need to have compassion for that person in the sense of they weren't willing to suffer. That all they've done is they have achieved their desired end of the consequences of their actions. You know what I'm saying? They're not suffering. They gave themselves over to whatever, so they're trying to avoid suffering. That's why they're at where they're at.
That was a delineation I realized I needed to make pretty quickly on when I began working the field that I am, is when I talk about suffering. I'm not talking about the abscess you've gotten in your arm from using intravenously. That is not the suffering I'm talking about.
Right.
The homelessness that you're experiencing is
Right.
not the suffering I'm talking about.
Right.
And I think it's important because, like,
Right.
what you just touched on, Father, is the waiting patiently, is the patiently enduring, sorry, patiently enduring. Because when that, I mean, I say it probably 2 or 3 times a week, is like my recovery is contingent upon my ability to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Because those things that
Mm-hmm.
people, the everyday, whatever of life, it's never going to be a big thing. It could be, we don't know. That would cause me to start drinking again or start indulging in some of my old behavioral habits. It is the thousand little cuts. And
Mm-hmm.
that little agitations, those little
Absolutely.
agitations, those build up, and to the catalyst to those agitations continuing to get worse and worse is the involvement of the ego, and which is like, I don't deserve this. This is not fair. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot believe that I'm stuck where
Mm-hmm.
I am. I cannot believe. And there's a lady I know who's like this, who is constantly, she's upset because she's not doing more with her life. She's working where I'm work at, so it's not a bad place. I mean, it's actually a well-respected job and a well-respected institution. But at the same time, it's this constant, like, I did anyway. So then all this compounds into like this like perfect moment of just all it needs is just a match to throw it in to throw you right back into because man, I should be doing this and this should be happening to me. And oh, I can't believe that I'm at this place. And I can't believe I have to work at Save a Lot. I used to, run 3 tire dealership. Well, what happened? You drank that stuff away. You put that money into your arm. You put that money through your liver. I can understand, but it's that lack of, awareness. And that's what I always say. Lack of awareness is what I'm here to talk about. You have no idea what your addiction really looks like and how much of it is fueled by your
And
your
so
inability.
I want to put a little bit of a kind of like connective tissue on what you're saying because you're saying so good, Andrew. But just to help people out, just so we're clear, because we're not talking about bootstraps either, right? Because it's, I know this is real kind of complex for people, and for some people, unfortunately, they're gonna feel like you're talking about both sides of your neck, but just because you don't know, you don't have the experience. But let me just tell you what we're talking about. Like, it's not so much success, but what it is, it's that contrition and your brokenness, the humility. It's
Mhm.
like, and it's really, it's one of those things. It's why there isn't a manual, and that's kind of part of that's part of my critique of a lot of my kind of professional social worker or whatever people that I've known, where it's just like, yeah, man, you kind of don't really know because your experience of that is like, I don't care really how many hours you volunteered. I don't really care what you've read. You'll never get the experience of being able to meet with someone unless you've been there. I'm sorry, that's just like a reality. Like forgive me, I know. So like I'm talking about in the trenches. I'm talking about in the trenches, right? So that being said, it's like being able to bear witness to someone suffering. Where that comes in is just like because I know you've seen it, I've seen it, we all seen it. It's like, yeah, man, you're not just kind of like the self-pity like junkie story where it's like you're always the victim. It's like we've all known the guy. It's like, man, and you just you're like, man, even it's maybe you've walked with them, maybe you're their case manager, whatever, but it's like this person really is got a bad hand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. And it's just kind of like they're not looking to take it out on other people. And if they do, they feel bad about it. It's kind of like, like they're like, I know I'm a monster. I don't want to be a monster. And they have these moments of awareness. But more importantly, when they are aware of their moments of not having awareness, they're deeply pained by that. And they are where they're at legitimately stuck. That's the difference. Because there's the guy who that guy who where it's like you lay out to them there's like their situation regards like, man, I lost my leg and this and that happened and blah 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 blah. And it's kind of like you're with them on that, and then you catch just a glimpse of something where it's just like, even if it's just that one thing out of 20, there's that one thing where they could have opened themselves up
Hmm.
to something, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
that one thing, they're like, ah. And then you bring them back to it's like, yeah, but what about this one thing right here? See, like
Yeah.
this is the thing that's in your control. This is the thing where like stop trying to want to like get back and like being on top, Jimmy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like, let's just take this one step right here. And
It's
then they either like, no, 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 and they just kind of double down, or you see them open up and maybe a light bulb goes on. It's just like, and yeah, the demons are there to want to pluck the seeds. I get that. But do you understand what I'm saying in regard to that?
no, it's amazing how often I've actually observed this whole because for a while like the addiction works and it's good and everything everybody assumes that they're going to return back to that time without the substance again. They automatically assume that they're going back to college, that nothing but glory awaits them and
Mm-hmm.
that they can finally be their whole selves, and they're assuming that their whole selves as they are now is a desirable thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's that actually like all really what's been holding them back is this drinking or this drug or whatever. And now, but it's the guys that are like, no, man, I'll take the $15 an hour pushing carts job.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking
It's so refreshing. It's like I've double taked before because I'm just so like, okay, so then what do you think of? I have no idea what I'm doing next. It's whatever my sponsor says. I'm like, I'm just done. I am done. I cannot do this anymore. I
about.
cannot ride this merry-go-round. If he says to go get a job at Save a Lot, I'll go do that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care. It's just, and it's so refreshing. And I'm like,
Let's get back to that obedience we were talking about last time.
yeah. And, you know, it's so limiting because then I can't talk about hierarchy and I can't talk about like, okay, well, even if you just do what your sponsor says, that's blessed. Like even if it's like outside of like something heinous, then just do it.
Just do
Like,
it.
I mean, I just do it. It's like, oh, you know, you must know better than I do how to do. Oh, I'm sorry. What were you doing a week ago? You're banging meth into your arm. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what to tell you, man. I don't know. Like, and I've had that conversation with a large amount of people, and that's actually that victimhood thing. That is where I get the most pushback from people. It it does that thing where the face distorts. Like the face distorts and you can see like the Frodo or the Bilbo and Lord of the
Mm-hmm.
Rings come out of for 1 second. And you're just like, all I'm saying is that some of this stuff is in your control. That's
Mm-hmm.
all I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to say like it is not your mom's fault. It's not your cousin's fault. It's not Pastor Jimmy, who apparently isn't doing so hot himself, that it's not his fault either that you are the way that you are now. It's you had a large portion of play and people can't hear that. It's just
Well,
it's
that's the demon popping out.
That's the demon.
Like
yeah,
you
I
see the
mean
demon be like, don't interrupt my game.
Yep.
if
You're
it's
interrupting my game right
Yeah.
now.
if it's the
Yeah.
same
You got
demon,
my don't break my hustle, man. You
Don't break my hustle. This is mine. This one's
yeah.
mine. Stop.
Yeah, this is
That's
my
what you're seeing.
generator. This is
if
my
Yeah,
this
that's what
generator.
you're seeing.
if
Yeah.
this is the same entity that's working within everyone that I'm encountering, if it's the same
Yes.
entity, then
Plural.
him and I, what's that, Father?
Entities.
Plural.
Well, what I'm saying
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
Legion.
if
It's Legion.
Legion.
then I'm starting to around their office, the entities, you know, around their office, like they're starting to talk about me at the water cooler. Not
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm making a significant difference, but just because I've encountered this same thing so many times. It's the same spirit
Mhm.
of victimhood, of rebellion, of anger, and it's just like I and then like it's just it makes me it's the same attacks and the same it's like the same strategies. So it's like, hey, haven't you noticed this guy out in the Midwest? Like it's like, yeah, that dude's been pissing me off. Like it's like I don't like they're just like sitting around and be like, hey, did you catch I don't know what TV they watch. Friends. They probably watched Friends in Hell, and then just be like, "Oh, did you see that episode or whatever?" He's like, "Yeah, by the way, this guy
Sex
Andrew
in
out
the
in the
City. They
Midwest."
watch Sex in the City.
Oh, yeah, it could be, yeah, but and because I've encountered it enough now where it's like, oh, I can almost
Well,
guarantee
because the thing is
what
too,
you're going to say next. Like,
what's interesting about on a serious note, what you're talking about is when, and this is the thing about, we were talking about last time about, cultures being possessed, right? Societies being
yeah,
possessed. I think that was last time we were talking about that.
could
But
be.
this thing about like this kind of like victim narrative, and it goes both ways, right? Because it's like, yeah, it's been the wokes, right?
Mhm.
But now the backlash is the kind of like victim narrative of the conservative.
The oppression of the white man.
Yeah, the pressure
Yeah,
of the white man, the
Yeah,
pressure of the
the
conservative,
the Great Replacement
the
Theory.
great, yeah. So the devil again, it's like which one you want, left or right. So like the thing is,
Right.
just the reason that this demon, these demons, this spirit, well, this principality, right? There's only the reason why it gets so ticked, and the reason why it's so um it's able to move so brazenly in and out of communities and individuals is because this man, Lord have mercy. Like, forgive me. I just when I just know it's a shtick for people. They just see it that way, but like it's not. You know what I'm saying? Because where's the army? Where are the legions of those? And yeah, go ahead and tell me. I know I'm not having an Elijah complex. You know what I'm saying? I alone, Lord, have not bowed my knee to Baal. There's 7,000 other priests. Like I get that, right? Just here's what I'm saying. Only Christ is innocent. Like that's why that demon is so strong. That's why
yeah,
those demons are so strong. And that's why they're so reactionary to when you try to call out the victim thing. That's why the violence and the incensed power that the wokes had in regards of like like the outrage and the rage is because it's like anytime you attack that narrative, it's like you're fundamentally invoking Christ. If you understand what I'm saying, in the same
Yeah.
way, when I say to people, like, if you seek wisdom, you'll find Christ. There is
Hmm.
no real wisdom apart from Christ,
Hmm.
right? True wisdom. If you
Hmm.
seek wisdom, you will find Christ, right? Well, it just kind of invert that. And it's like, if you always deny that temptation to feel like a victim, you'll find Christ. The
Uh-huh.
reason why is because he's the only innocent one. He, oh my gosh, if you have
Woo!
Christ,
That was that
people,
honestly that one was a bomb. That was
Yeah, he's done. He's out. Mic drop. I
he
don't think he
literally
actually.
mic dropped and left.
Yeah. I'm not sure he
He
meant to
mic
do that,
dropped
but
and left.
I'm gonna pretend that he did. That's pretty good.
That may be the greatest.
Yeah. He should start doing that more.
That may be the greatest moment of this entire podcast.
I'm gonna text him.
If you are watching this on Spotify or listening on Spotify, you
Father just
must go to YouTube right now.
yeah.
And if you're just listening on a podcast, you must go to YouTube right now. Pay attention to the timestamp and go and find go and find it. I hope he's okay.
No, he's
I hope
fine.
he's okay. That was absolutely.
I just told him let the mic drop breathe. So we're gonna end it there.
Oh,
We're gonna end it there.
okay.
Um
Let's end it there. That was great.
yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, end
Uh
it there. All right.
yeah. So okay. If you want to contact us, Royal Path, contact at royalpath.network.
Oh,
And then I think a couple of people, or maybe just one, I can't remember. Um, hold on. I'm gonna text him real yet. Hold on one second.
I think that was it. I mean,
No,
what
yeah,
do
I
you,
told
how
him
do you
don't
come
come
back?
back.
How do you
I
come?
told
Yeah,
him.
how
I
do
was
you
like,
come
don't
back
come
from
back.
that?
Yeah,
How do
you're
you come
good.
back from that? That's I mean,
Contact at royalpath.network. Some people reached or asked for my specific. It's Andrew at royalpath.network. Please reach out there. It always takes some time for me to get back to everyone. Just be patient, please. Go to check out Mount Tabor. It's a school that's associated with St. Mary's. There's a Schola coffee based out of there.
Mhm.
Really good coffee. It's what we drink every Sunday. Mount
Yep.
Tabor is oh, it's just so incredibly near and dear to my heart. As a thing of beauty. If you get me there at the right time in the morning to drop off my daughter, I just had a good amount of tea and I'm feeling I just start weeping. It's all of my
I love it.
kids and all the kids I love all in one spot playing and beginning their school
That's
day
so
with
good.
prayer. Sometimes Father comes and gives a word. They read the homily or the prologue, Saint Nikolai.
That's
It's
beautiful.
just it's God, there's church, and right there is Mount Tabor. It's I love it. I would think of it and get warm. I cannot begin to tell you the wonderful things that are happening at that school. Please check it out. So beyond that, we have a couple playlists on music. If we mention someone, we try and put it on there. The music, it's Royal Path podcast playlist, something like that. Jack, amazing. Again, the
Mhm.
thumbnails that you're doing, fourth member of the show. Thank you so much, Jack. And what else do we do? Oh, we have a merch store, Royal
That's it.
Path
Oh,
dot
merch.
store. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So go check out. Um, thanks for having a good night. Bye bye.
Bye bye.